Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a winter storm which is currently going to be moving from parts of the southern plains and into the southeast all the way up into parts of the northeast where we could be dealing with upwards of 10 inches or more of snowfall. This is going to be covering a large area, even covering parts of the Ohio Valley, much of the interior northeast as well. And then behind the event, we're going to be dealing with very cold conditions. We already have a couple winter storm watches up for this event, and we're going to be covering a couple more updates on this storm. Probably tomorrow we'll have another update on this event, just to keep you up to date with the latest information. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. We have freeze warnings in effect for parts of northwestern California and southwestern Oregon, as well as some frost advisories for one little area in California as well. We have some winter weather advisories up for parts of Montana, as well as some more red flag warnings for the Great Plains and also into the southwest. We have wind advisories for some scattered areas of the southwest, as well as for the Dakotas and Minnesota as well. And then we have some, I believe those are fire weather watches in effect in that kind of tan color, that very, very light brown color, I guess you could say there, in parts of Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, a little bit of Kansas, and a little bit of Wisconsin as well. And then we have some freeze watches in effect for southwestern Missouri, northern Arkansas, northeastern Oklahoma, and southeastern parts of Kansas as well. We have some flood watches in effect still for much of eastern and central Tennessee, southeastern parts of Kentucky, southwestern Virginia, and also into southernmost West Virginia as well. So unfortunately, they are still dealing with flooding in those areas. And then we have some winter storm watches in effect for northern New York, and that's because of the winter storm that we're going to be talking about in today's video. Yesterday in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, they got to 97 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as in Ocotillo Wells, California, they also got to 97 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the high temperature for the lower 48. 6 miles east of Champion, Michigan, they got to 6 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the low temperature, and that's tied with Spinsich Lake in Michigan. They also got to 6 degrees Fahrenheit. That is also the national low temperature for yesterday. The highest precipitation or rainfall report was in May Creek, Washington, where they got 2.3 inches of rainfall, and the highest snowfall report was in Three Lakes, Michigan, and the UP of Michigan, where they got 5.9 inches of reported snowfall yesterday. Here's what the European model is going to show for this storm, and then we're going to look at the GFS model and a couple other storms. But before we do want to look out at what's happening in the upper air and what's surrounding this system. So here's your storm right down here. So all this rain is what your system is actually going to become. It's just an area of disorganized showers by this point that's not really causing too many issues. You have your high pressure, which is out here right over the Atlantic, and that's going to be spinning away and generally creating a flow somewhat like this. So your storm is going to head right in between this high pressure and the next high pressure, which is back here, and it's going to kind of squeeze right in between there, and it's going to move up through the northeast because that's the path of least resistance, and that's the path that will be easiest for the storm to travel through. So that's generally the path that the storm is going to take. So this will be by later today, according to the European model. We then go into Wednesday morning. So tomorrow morning, we have some heavy rains over the Tennessee Valley. That's where we have those flood watches already up. All by this point, it's still all rain. Really no mixing or snowfall issues just yet. But it's as we switch over to Thursday early in the morning when we start to see our first signs of snowfall entering the northeast. So you can see mixing in the pink, snow in the blue, and that covers much of the Appalachians all the way up into parts of western New York, western Pennsylvania, and eastern Ohio as well. So heavy to moderate snowfall in most of these areas. You're dealing with that low pressure, which by this point is right over here. So this is where your low pressure is, right here. It's going to continue moving further to the north and to the east, and as it's doing that, it's actually bringing in very warm air on the eastern side of this. So, for example, areas in southeastern New England are going to have low temperatures in the mid-50s, while, for example, some areas in Virginia and North Carolina on that same day are going to have low temperatures in the 30s, because we're going to be dealing with a lot of cold air being brought down on the back end. But, for example, southeastern New England again, they're going to be on the eastern side of this storm. They're going to get stuck in that warm sector, so they're not really going to have too much cold air to contend with. So a really dynamic type of storm. That's why we have all that snowfall. And by the way, look at where the 32-degree line is. It's all the way up here in parts of upstate New York, northern Pennsylvania. So a lot of these areas are dealing with snowfall at a temperature of 33, 34, 35 degrees. So that might hinder accumulations. It'll be harder to stick, especially to roads. It shouldn't have too hard of a time sticking to grass or colder surfaces. However, here to be by Thursday morning. So this is right around 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we're dealing with moderate to heavy snow, now covering a much larger area stretching up through northern New York, northern Vermont, and as far south as western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee and some of the higher elevations. Here's where your low pressure is by this point, and again, it's continuing to move further to the north, and we're dealing with a lot of cold air. By this point, it's more of a fluffy snowfall because here's where your 32-degree line is. So this is that 32-degree line. Anywhere to the west and north of there is where you're dealing with below 32-degree temperatures, so much fluffier snowfall, probably in the 20s and 30s by this point. The second part of the storm, I think, will be a much easier to shovel snowfall. It's going to be that first few hours that really stick very, very quickly, that you could deal with potentially some issues with very, very heavy wet snowfall, but again, as more cold air gets dragged down, we're going to be dealing with much more fluffier, lighter snowfall. Luckily, on the back end, that should be easier to be melted by the sun, and also easier to shovel away off your driveway or off the sidewalks. Here to be by Thursday in the early afternoon. And we have that low pressure up in New England with a lot of that snowfall now heading further to the north. So we're getting into parts of Quebec, Canada, northern Vermont, upstate New York, northeastern Pennsylvania by this point, where we're dealing with some of that snowfall. Your 32-degree line now pretty much centered anywhere in this kind of bubble is where that 32-degree line is. But if you live outside of there, we're dealing with temperatures mostly above 32 degrees. So this is when it could still be a fairly wet snowfall for a lot of these areas. It looks like it does get into a much fluffier snow by Thursday night in most of the interior northeast and parts of Quebec and Canada. So it looks like these areas are in the 20s by this point by Thursday night into Friday morning. So again, it's becoming a much fluffier, lighter snowfall, much easier to shovel than a wetter snowfall that's falling at a 34-degree or 35-degree temperature. Here to be by Friday early in the morning, and it's really wrapping up by this point, and you can really tell how much cold air is being dragged in, because if you look at this, we have your 32-degree line getting all the way down to the coast, and then we have all this warm air, rain getting all the way up into parts of southeastern Canada. So you can see all that warm air being pulled in, but also all that cold air being pulled in as well. And then this would be by Friday in the morning, and it's really wrapping up by this point, moving into parts of eastern Canada. Here's what the GFS model is showing for the same exact storm, and they are fairly similar. They don't have too many disagreements. So here's your storm by this point. It's down in the southeast, and let's continue this forward. Here would be by Wednesday morning, mostly rainfall, a little bit of snow breaking out in Canada, but over a very, very small region. It does start to expand, though, as we get into Wednesday night. So we're dealing with a little bit of scattered snowfall into the Ohio Valley by Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Then by Thursday, early in the morning, we have that low pressure up through parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And on the other side of Pennsylvania, in western Pennsylvania, western New York, West Virginia, we're dealing with all of that snowfall, heavy to moderate snowfall in many of these areas. So it's accumulating at a rate of about half an inch to an inch per hour in most of these areas. Then by Thursday, right around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, we're dealing with more of that snow spreading now up into northern New York, northern Vermont, and southeastern Canada, with those heavy snow bands moving further to the north. By the way, look at this on the back end. We have a big plunge of very, very cold air due to this high pressure, which is over parts of the central United States. And that's going to be dragging in all that cold air on the back end. We're going to have temperatures that are getting into the 20s and teens after the storm departs. Here to be by Thursday early in the afternoon. And we have snowfall for much of the interior northeast still. Maybe a couple mixing issues up through parts of Maine and New Hampshire with a little bit of ice mixed in. And then it switches over to snow in a lot of these areas according to the GFS by Friday morning. Here's what the snowfall totals on the GFS model look like, and you can see that we have snow amounts that are anywhere in the grays under an inch to 2 inches, 2 to 6 inches in the blues, 6 to 10 inches in the purples, 10 plus inches in the pinks. So you can see that we have most of that heavy snowfall centered over this area right here in the northeast. We're really going to have to watch out, even though this area isn't heavily populated, but there is really a lot of discrepancy over this area right here as to whether northern Maine will get 10 inches or just maybe a dusting to 2 inches. There really have been a lot of discrepancies within the models, but for the most part, they have agreed that this area right here is going to be generally near the bullseye of what we're expecting with this event. If we look at what the Canadian model is showing, and then we're going to show you the European in just a little bit, but here's what the Canadian model is showing. We're seeing 2 to 6 inches plus in this entire area through the interior northeast. And again, here's that discrepancy. The last model was showing 10 plus inches here. We're looking at maybe up to an inch in these areas if the Canadian model is correct. So there is still a lot of things that we do have to watch out for. Here would be the low temperature for the low temperatures after this event, because they will be quite substantial because we will be dealing with a lot of cold air being pulled down. Again, that example that I was talking about earlier, look at southeastern New England. We're in the mid 50s if you live in that area, and then you go down into Tennessee, Kentucky, and they're in the 30s if at the same time frame for Thursday in the morning. So really an interesting setup here because of that low pressure bringing in so much warm air and the abundance of cold air that we really have on the back end. This would be by the 2nd of April, so Friday. We have temperatures along the Appalachians and into some of the higher elevations of the northeast getting down into the teens, and we have many 20s that are centered over this entire area in the eastern half of the country, even some 30s as you get further to the south here into the southeast. So really anywhere east of the Mississippi is going to be escaping this cold air, and then this would be by Saturday the 3rd of April, and we're dealing with still 20s lingering on for the eastern seaboard. Some areas further inland are getting a little bit warmer, but still we have 30s that are engulfing much of the eastern United States. So really we are still in a cold, chilly pattern if this were to be the case. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.